So the CTE class was put together for you guys, for drivers, and it was put together just to help technicians and tow truck drivers stay safe and have a positive attitude while performing roadside services. So real quick about me, so that way you guys understand. I haven't met a lot of you guys. I have met some. I started in towing my whole life. My family owned a towing company, and I grew up as a kid running calls and hanging out with the guys and going on wrecks over the side calls, and my whole life, and running rotators, big rigs, Landaus, 3-car carriers, down to just regular light service trucks for 26 years of my life. And after that, I came to this side of AAA in 2012, and the experiences that I've picked up from being on this side of AAA sent me to all these places that we got to see and go to talk to people like you guys, tow truck drivers, service truck drivers, owners, contract owners, and be able to meet. And the one thing that I got to find that was really neat, and it was consistent, was every place I've been, it's all the same. The members act the same. They all have that card and they all want great service, right? And the drivers all act the same in every state. It doesn't matter. But I have to say, here in Kentucky, well, they also said it didn't snow in Kentucky too. They told me, they said, Richard, you got to come out to Kentucky. It don't snow. They got light winters. Let me tell you something. It's cold outside and it's been snowing like you wouldn't believe. I don't like it much, but you guys are heroes just for that. Let me tell you. But the people in Kentucky treat people great here. I mean, you guys have some members out here that are really nice. That are really they actually look past a lot of our shortcomings, and so that's just something extra that you guys got that I found in a lot of the different markets. And I like to meet everybody. Sometimes when the group's too big, it's hard to meet everybody, so I try to get some things out of the way first, right? Is like, how many people ran calls yesterday? Like, everybody here ran calls. How many people ran more than 5 calls? Right? There's a couple hundred calls right there. That's a couple hundred calls from a group of people. How many of them went so bad where the member yelled at them and cussed them out? One out of a couple hundred, right? So the reason why I asked that in a group of the room of people is it's not about that one call that went bad. It's about all the calls that went right, right? So I try to get everybody focusing on all the great calls that they can remember, right? And all the great experiences. How many people do this job because they make a ton of money? You don't make a ton of money as a tow truck driver. How many people do this job because they made somebody smile, right? How many times you get satisfaction from changing somebody's life? And so that's why I put this workshop together, and that was to speak to drivers and let them know that you guys make a difference, right? First part of what I ask is, how long has AAA been in business? Anybody know when they actually started?
It's 112 years, right?
Almost. Pretty close. It's pretty close, right? December 3rd, it was 117 years, right? 117 years that they started, and when they first started running roadside service, it was way different than what the look is today. But it was back then, it was so professional looking. And they had a model. AAA put a model together, creating members for life by exceeding members' expectations through valuable products and legendary service. And so as a tow truck driver, when I was sitting on the other side of classrooms, when people were teaching, everything that I would always think about was, how does it affect me? What does it matter to me? What am I going to get out of it, right? Well, let me tell you something. What part we play in AAA, all these presidents that were talking to us, is a legendary service. AAA wasn't first built on, show your card and save. It wasn't built on, car insurance. It was built on the backs of people going out roadside and doing the job. And how they did it, and how they looked, and how they dressed, and how they acted was really a big difference than what we're seeing, in the early 80s and 90s, how the change went, and to what people are looking professional like you guys today. The changes, and that's what we talk about in CTE, is how we can look professional, act professional. I also built this class to change some of the words that we use. All right. A lot of times we get into pitfalls of what we think is okay to say out there on the roadside, or some of the things that we do, and we don't really know the effect that they have on people. So I talk about those things in this workshop to be able to try to change people's mindset on the way that we communicate with people and some of the things that we might do, right, so we can get the best result. Right? You guys know that we all live in this world that we get surveyed. You can't drive down the street, go to a Jack in the Box, or pull into a McDonald's or anywhere without somebody saying, here, fill out a survey. Right? It doesn't matter what business it is, they're saying fill out a survey. And so, in this business, we all get graded. We get graded on overall satisfaction by our AAA members. We get graded on response time by our AAA members. We get graded by the driver. Why is the driver so important? Why is the driver so important? Because you guys are the last. You guys are the front line to the member. You're the last person that sees the member. You're the last one that leaves a lasting impression on that member if they might re-sign up and rejoin, right? So these things matter. You guys matter, and that's why this workshop was put together. I talked to guys, like I told you, this business started back in 1900. This is how guys showed up to provide service. This guy's got a white jacket on. Who goes out and provides service in a white jacket? He's got a white jacket, a white hat, changing the tire. He showed up on a motorcycle with a little sidecar and has all his tools right there. And he looks like he just got out of tow truck church. Right? It doesn't look realistic, but these are how people showed up to provide service back in the 1900s. These are the beginning days of AAA and roadside service. When they went out there and they provided service, they showed up looking great. They showed up with ties, bow ties. They showed up in suits. These are the original fleet before the California Highway Patrol became the California Highway Patrol. If you look at the sides of these cars, they provided mechanical first aid and medical first aid. They were out there, pirating the highways and making sure people were safe medically and automotively. And so the things that they were able to do and the way that they were able to produce themselves, that's what people got. They knew. Right? And that's what they felt comfortable, who was coming up to see them. If you guys look at today's commercials, when I watch on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, a AAA commercial come on, an infomercial comes on, and all of these members are watching it and they're deciding if they're going to join, and they see the guy that's coming out there to help them. This guy looks like, he's never ran a call in his life. He's got his uniforms pressed, and he looks like these guys, right? So when we come out a little bit less, when we come out just a little bit less dressed, when we come out a little bit more dirty, or with our shirts hanging out, or our shirts untucked, right? We're already lowering the expectations. Now, back when I first started running calls on my own, I remember in 1986, when I first started running calls on my own, my stepdad looked at me and he said, "Did you get your driver's license today?" I was 16. I said, "Yeah." He took keys, he threw them at me, and he said, "Hurry up, let's go, we're holding calls." And I'm like, okay, great. I went and ran my first call. I was nervous as heck. Went and ran my first call on my own, right? We stopped focusing on service back in the 80s, where it was about the customer. It was about a car. And so I started looking for models that I came up with. Instead of moving cars, it's about moving people. I had one driver that talked to me in Pittsburgh when we were doing one of these classes. He says, you want me to get up and pick up this guy and move him? I'm like, I want you to move him with an interaction. Right? It's about moving these people. It's about sometimes the tow companies that you guys have, the drivers hang out at the end of the day. My guys did at my shop, and it's like, how many calls did you run? Right? And everybody's looking at their paperwork, and I got 16 calls, or I got 20 calls today. And I ask drivers now today is, how many of those calls did you make count? Right? And they all counted. I got paid for every one of them. How many of them did you go the extra mile? How many of them did you take the extra step? How many of them did you make a member smile? Right? We already talked about, you guys all raised your hand, that most of us all do this because it's about a smile. It's about making somebody feel good. It's about what you do matters. That's what this workshop's all about, is to inform you guys what you do really matters, that you make a difference in somebody's life every single day. Every time you run a call, somebody's life is being impacted for some reason, and those are the things that we talk about. I call this, do you remember when service was service, right? Back when we had full service gas stations, a person would pull up to the gas station to get service, and 3 guys would be waiting there, right? 3 guys would be waiting there, and you just pulled up. Gas was like 25 cents. Right? But you had 3 guys waiting there where they would run up, one's putting air in your tires, one's, filling your car up, another one's checking your oil, another one's cleaning your window. They're sweeping out your car. These are real pictures from back when people provided service, when service was service. We lost sight of that, and I noticed that back in the 80s, we would go out and run calls, and it was about hook and book. It was the boss was yelling, "Hurry up, we're holding calls. We got a lot of calls." Right? And you would stop and you would lose sight of the fact that these people paid for a membership and they're waiting for us. And they got all kinds of things going on in their life that we forget about. Right? And then it's just about the car. And so when the hook and book theory was going on, we were just moving cars from one place to the other, and it wasn't really about the member. If they had a great interaction, they were lucky if they got their car where they were going. I remember back in the 70s. Back in the 70s was when full service stopped. I remember it never came back again, and the fuel wars that were going on. I was a little kid with my mom, and I remember waiting in a car, and you couldn't get gas in California in the 1970s. If your license plate was even or odd, you had to wait to make sure that day was a day that it matched for you to be able to buy a few gallons of fuel. But there was nobody. There's nobody waiting. You got a guy waiting with his lawnmower to get gas. That's how bad the gas wars were. But there's nobody waiting at the pumps to provide full service. There's nobody there checking your oil anymore. There's nobody there to greet you with a smile and give you something that you were paying for. I say don't be this guy. This is what it was like back in 1980, 86, when I was running calls. We stopped caring about how we were dressed when we went out to go run calls. We stopped caring about the customer service and the interaction, and we lost sight of where we were going and how to provide service. So this workshop's all about that. You know, I remember, how many of you guys have heard of Highway Heroes? Right? I remember the Auto Club first started up Highway Heroes. They started in 2006. They launched the Highway Hero program, and it was about appreciating drivers. And I remember that was the first time in a long time of running AAA calls where I felt like, okay, wait, they're trying to appreciate it. They're trying to appreciate something. But I was still kind of had a disconnect from it because it didn't really relate to me on the beginning of what I thought as a tow truck driver and a service truck driver sitting on the other side of the room, what they were trying to connect with me. And so I sat there, and I always try to find on everything that I do is, what does it matter? How can I make it important? You know, I already told you guys that what you guys do matters on every single call. And for me, Highway Heroes is more important than a slogan. It's more important than a campaign and giving drivers gift cards. I know gift cards are fun. I know you guys get mystery shop and you get gift cards and you enter these challenges. They're fun. But for me, there's very important stories that happen in my life that relate to every single tow truck driver. They relate to every single service truck driver. They relate to every time you run a call. You know, that somebody on the other side of that call is waiting for you, and how important it is. And sometimes we lose sight of how important it is to show up and do that call. I remember that I was sitting with my crew of drivers, and we were sitting in a grocery store parking lot. We had a little bit of lull in the business, and I was out there meeting with my guys, and I was talking to them the importance that we have to hurry up and get to the calls. We got to respond when these calls come. And we had mentors in our trucks, and the calls would land on the mentor, and you'd hear that beeping noise, beep, 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 just like on your guys' tablets, you know. And so I was sitting there coaching them, and I had a choice to make. Had a choice to make to either hurry up and jump in the truck and go run the call because I was talking about them, to respond right away when that computer went off, and get out there and get to the member and how much time mattered. Or I could have sat there and talked to them a little while longer and then chose one of the other guys just to go run the call. But I wanted to show them. I wanted to lead by example. So I jumped in my truck and I looked at the mentor, and I had a hot call. And it was right across the street. The hot call was right across the street at the Kaiser Hospital. And I'm like thinking in my brain, hot call, Kaiser Hospital, you're already at a hospital. What's the emergency, right? But I couldn't stop and I couldn't think about that. I had to show my guys what I wanted them to do. So I hurried up, I called my member, I talked to them, I let them know I was on my way to go and help them. Turns out that we never know what's going on in these people's lives and these calls when we go to run these calls. I got there and the lady was a wreck. She was crying in tears, right? Her husband was in the hospital and he was dying. And she had paperwork that she needed to get from the house to be able to keep him on life support, so that way his children could make it from across state to be able to be there before they took him off life support. She was crying. I knew she was in no condition to drive. And I looked at her and I told her, ma'am, I don't want to change your tire right now. I said, where do you live? She says, I live a mile away. I said, I'm going to take you home. Go get the paperwork and I'll take you back to the hospital. Then you go in there and you give them the paperwork that you need. I'll change your tire and I'll take the keys back inside and give them to the nurse. That lady remembered that forever. She wrote a letter over to AAA and they had gave it to my boss, and my boss brought it to me, and that made a difference in that lady's life, that her children were able to come and they were able to say goodbye to their dad before they took him off life support. We never know. Every single one of you guys gets that call. Every single one of you guys, when you go to run a call, and every time you see your tablet go off, we don't know what's going on in that member's life. We don't know how many times have you guys got a lockout call in the summer and it's 100 degrees outside, right? How many people know somebody that's on Social Security, 70 years old, 80 years old, and that they don't get another Social Security check? It doesn't come in the mail. No more free money comes in the mail for them to be able to go out and buy groceries. I got that call. I had a little 70-year-old lady that was in Southern California. It gets to be pretty hot over there during the summer. And it was 108 outside. She had all of her groceries in the trunk. And she was waiting for somebody like me to come unlock her car. But guess what? If I would have took my time to get there, or if I would have been like, oh, I can just stop and go get a pop real quick, I'm hot, get a water, or whatever it is, without responding to that call right away, who was going to buy that lady's groceries? Right? There was no more Social Security check coming in, and that was her last bit of food. I got there in a really fast amount of time. I didn't know her situation. I didn't know her life story, right? But when I got there and I opened her car within a second to open her car, and she got in her trunk and she got stuff out and nothing was spoiled, that made a difference in her life, right? And you guys make a difference every single time you run somebody's call. Every single time. There's somebody's life that's been stopped from very small to very big. And I say it's that important to you guys about the Highway Hero campaign and how important that is. But I also talk to drivers all around the United States about two very important stories. How many guys in this room have been towing or light servicing for more than 5 years? How about 10 years? Right? 15 years? 20 years? There we go. Look at this. We got from 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of towing in this room right here. I towed for 26 years before I came on this side of AAA. And I remember the first time. How many of you guys remember the first call you ran? Right? And if you guys are really honest, how many people really remember when they go in there and they had the car secured to the tow truck on that very first call, right, that they weren't worried it was going to fall off? Right? They weren't worried that how many times did you guys walk right back around that tow truck and go look and say, man, I got that strap on, I got that strap on, yep, okay, I'm good to go. And then you're driving down the road and you're like thinking, is it going to fall off? Right? That's what's going through your mind on your first tow. But then something happened. You got comfortable. Right? How many times you can honestly say in your own mind when you go to run a call that you're like, I can get away with only one chain today. Right? I can only get away with one strap today. Nobody's going to know. The bosses are in the office, right? How many times did you not put on both safety straps or both chains or both tie downs or your drag lights, right? How many times did you not do these things because you got really comfortable? I did it, right? And so things got real comfortable, and guess what? That's when things happen. In 1997, Cinco de Mayo, 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a call where I was already asleep at home, been working all day, running calls all day long, and I had first shift backup. And I got that call at 2 o'clock in the morning on the 60 freeway in the city of Hacienda Heights. I was on a blind curve, and there was a lady waiting there for me to come and rescue her, and she had a flat tire. And I went out there to go change that tire, right? And I was too comfortable. Plus, when you're in your early 20s, it's like, it's no big deal. You're like invincible. Nothing can hurt you, you know? And I had my tow truck where I knew I could park it better, but I just parked it really fast, got out of my truck, and I started changing that tire. Well, you don't know what's going to happen any one of those seconds when that drunk driver hits the center drive wall and it comes right at you. And you're on a bridge and you got nowhere to go. And you got a last second choice to jump off the bridge or jump on top of the car. And you just close your eyes and jump. I did that, right? I made sure that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time and I didn't protect myself, right? And my last second choice was to jump through the car and hit my head into the windshield, and I broke both of my arms and both of my legs, and I got my shoulder bolted together, my knee is plastic, and my ankles got pins. They ripped a piece of steel out of my hand, right? I got permanent nerve damage in my hand because I got too comfortable with my job. I'm telling you right now, being a highway hero is more important. Nothing is more important than you. Nothing is more important than you making it home at the end of the day. Nothing is more important than you making it to see your family. And nothing's more important than you making sure to always do it right. Because it only takes a half a second, maybe 1 minute longer to do it the right way, to put the extra straps. For me in that scenario that night was to park my truck in the back of it instead of the front of it. To put it right there on the fog line and turn my wheels away from me instead of into me, right? To make sure that maybe I had some high visible clothes on. To make sure all these things that I didn't do because I was too comfortable in my job, which cost me 6 months of surgeries, right? And a lot of extra pain. But I got too comfortable. So I tell you to be cautious. I tell you to make sure that you're doing the right thing. It takes an extra minute to stay safe because there's nothing more important than you going home. I tell you that one story is about a guy getting too comfortable. And I tell you another story that's very important to me, and it's about two guys not working together. Right? This story is Tango's story, and I tell it all over everywhere the AAA sent me because we're all being faced with it every single day. How many guys in this room share a tow truck with somebody else? Right? How many times do you get upset when you walk to go get in that tow truck that somebody, put the chains in the wrong spot and took the tools out and threw the tools on another side, and it's not where you want it to be, or they left it a complete dirty mess inside the truck, and they ate food and spit out sunflower seeds and they fell all over the floor, and you go to get into your truck and you're like angry, like I'm going to wring this guy's neck, right? And you're that mad. But I tell you, when we get that mad, we're like a band of brothers out there running calls together, and it depends on us to work together to make sure, number one, the members get rescued, they get safe, but you also go home safe. Tango story is about two guys decided it was time to stop working together. On December 17th in 2011, Tango came into my office and he was yelling and screaming because the person that was driving his truck had left it a filthy mess, and they had cigarette ashes on the floor and sunflower seeds all over the place, and the steering wheel was greasy, and he was almost ready to quit over it. And I calmed him down and I said, man, please, it's Friday night, we've had a ton of bad calls, I'll help you clean your truck, and we'll get you on the road, and we'll make a new assignment of trucks, right? And he goes, all right, boss. And he calmed down and he was good to go. Right? And he went out there and he was running his calls and he was doing everything that he needed to do his job. But they were kind of still, even I went home, they were kind of bickering a little bit on the radio, but they were doing their job. Well, it got towards 2 o'clock in the morning and Tango got that call. It was almost 2 o'clock in the morning on the 91 freeway in the city of Riverside at the Adams exit, where Tango was servicing a member, and there's a big concrete wall right there with no shoulder. There's no shoulder. Tango had his truck right there, still sitting outside the fog line. He knew it was a bad spot, but he also knew he had 2 AAA members waiting in the back of their car, waiting to be rescued. He got on the radio and he asked for help, and the driver didn't come and help him because it was time for him to go home, and maybe because they were arguing a little bit, and the driver went home. Tango knew that he was out there and he was stuck alone, that there was going to be nobody there to help him in that scenario, so he went and he got those members to safety, and he put them inside his truck. He put them inside his truck. They were good. Tango went back out, and he was working the controls from the driver's side, right? Because there's no way he could work it from the passenger side. And that member came, that guy came, that drunk driver came, and he killed my friend. And, there's nothing worse in that part of the story is that Tango had 2 little boys that depended on him coming home. And I had to go, and I had to talk to those 2 little boys and tell them their dad wasn't coming home anymore. That's the worst part about 2 guys deciding it was time to stop working together, and that they needed to work together for the better good of keeping everybody safe. Let me tell you, how many times have you been driving down the freeway on the 265 right here in Louisville, right, or the 264, and sit there and see one of your other fellow tow truck drivers that, even though if he didn't work for your company, but he was in a bad spot, and that maybe you could have just pulled over for a second and blocked for him and made it sure so he went home at the end of the day. All of those things matter because you need that. Somebody's going to see that you're in a bad spot and that they're just going to pull over and they're going to block for you for just a second to make sure you go home at the end of the day. Those are my 2 stories on being a highway hero, and they're really important. It's because what you guys do matters, and what you guys do going home at the end of the day matters. And so for me, that's what the real highway hero story is about, is you guys. So, for me, I built this workshop for knowing and running the calls just like you guys ran every single day, and figuring out all the little pitfalls that we fall into and the things that we could do, just to make sure that we stay consistent. How many of us figured it out, right? When we first started towing and we went out there, or even if we were a service truck driver changing a tire, when we first started doing it, we were kind of all over the place. You went to the truck, you got your jack, and then you went back, and you're like, oh, I forgot my star bar, and you went back, and then, and you went there and you go to a tow, and you're like, you put a chain on this side, and then you go put a chain on this side, and then you forget stuff, right? But how long did it take us to build a routine, right? That we keep that same routine, and we stop damaging stuff, and we stop forgetting stuff, and we stop losing equipment. It's by consistent procedures, proper communication, and confident techniques. Those are my 3 C's on making sure that we do the job right. I built this, every single one of you guys, we have this 4 steps to CTE, right? And so this is it's a really quick, it's 4 steps, and it's just pitfalls that we fall into, how we can change things that we say and do, and how we can make sure that we're doing the right stuff, right? Earlier when I talked to you guys about the response time, the driver, and the overall satisfaction, which one is the worst one that we get graded on? Anybody tell me? I'm sorry? Response time, exactly. 100% is the response time out of the 3 that we get graded on is the worst. Why is it? Why is response time the worst that we graded on?
Gives time to go. How long they wait.
People's perception of how long they waited. It's their perception, right? That's 100% the right answer. I'm going to tell you right now, back in the 80s, I'm telling you, when I first started running calls in 1986, people didn't have cell phones. These are the reason why. This right here is the reason why our response time goals are worse than what they are. We live in the now network. We live in the I text you and you better respond within a few seconds. I know I text my wife, and how long am I going to feel comfortable waiting for her to answer me? I know me, I'll do it, and within 10 seconds, if she doesn't respond to me, I'm thinking, who is she talking to and where is she at, right? So I know that this ruined our response time. Back in 1986, when I first started running calls, I had a pager, right? I had a pager with no truck radio. My pager would go off and I'd start driving around and I'd start looking for a payphone, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, got to get a quarter out and put a quarter in, and then I'd call my shop and I'd write stuff down. But guess what? The members were living the same scenario. They didn't have cell phones. They had to walk to a payphone, call for a AAA, and then walk back to their car. So their perception of time was gone. But in today's world, in the Now Network, when they call in for service, right, they expect you there now. Like they turn around, they hung up the phone and blink, you're there, right? And that's what they're expecting. But it's not the reality. So we have to be able to overcome the one big negative in the response time is you taking control of it. When does the member put us on the clock? When they first call AAA? I agree, and that's the same thing that I used to think until I was able to really study it. Members put us on the clock when they first break down. They put us on the clock when they first break down, when the world got stopped, when something mattered. Because I know, okay, for me, I'm this Italian kid from New York. My wife, she's Hawaiian. We got a little girl, we call her our spicy pineapple, right? She's a pistol. Every day when I'm home in California, she wants to go to school. She wants to go to school at 7 o'clock on the nose, right? And she'll be like, Dad, come on, let's go. It's 7 o'clock, I gotta go. And I'm like, okay, baby, all right. We go out to the car. This morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, I go to open my door, and the door's locked. I can't get in my car, and I'm like, oh, shoot. Right? And I'll sit there and I'll call my wife. I'm like, have you seen my spare set of keys? She's at work already. She's like, no. Right? And so then she'll be like, did you look, did you call AAA? And I'm like, oh no, I forgot that one. Right? And I'll go get my wallet and I'll call AAA, and I'm talking to some lady and I'm trying to give her my street address. She can't even pronounce my street. I got no comfort level in knowing that she's going to get me the right guy to come and help me, and all I do is hear her typing and humming and hawing in the background. I'm like, man, my little girl's in the background. Come on, Dad, because she doesn't want to be late. But I remember 7 o'clock. And finally, some guy gets there to open my car, and he didn't call me, and that time is miserable. Let me see. How many of you people in this room today think 5 minutes is a long time? Not too bad when you're in your tow truck and you're busting out calls. 5 minutes goes by like this, but let me tell you something. Be a member in a need to get somewhere, right, and have no ability to get there. Your phone is dying. You got a clock on your car, and you got nobody to help you. 5 minutes is forever. If you when you're home tonight, let's just see if I'm crazy or not. Just sit there in a room and stare at a clock for 5 minutes and see how long it takes. That's forever. Well, these members do that all the time, and they wait even longer, and they don't hear from somebody waiting to come and help them. It's a big deal. Members can tell. How many of you guys know the difference in the tones in a room when somebody's calling? When you call somebody and you talk to somebody on the phone and they're typing, that person's inside a room typing, right? How many of us know when somebody's calling us from the bathroom? Right? I got a friend, he always calls me from the bathroom. His name's Bugs. He'll call me, my phone will ring, I'll see his name, I'll answer him, you hear that echo in the background, and I'll be like, hey Bugs, are you in the bathroom? He's like, yeah. I'm like, why you always call me from the bathroom? And he says, well, I think better here. I'm like, stop thinking about me, and I'll hang up, right? And it's people's comfortable level when you call them, when you're a driver, and they hear the background noise, and they hear the tow truck, and they hear the shop radio, and they know that they're talking to the guy that's actually coming to help them. It's the first time that they're able to sigh. It's the first time that they're able to say, I just talked to the guy who's coming to help me, right? It's the first time. We all said just a little while ago that the response time is the worst thing that we get graded on. They're able to say they can stop the clock, right? I talked to the guy who's coming to help me. How many of you guys in this room right now today call their members? That's awesome. That's a lot of people calling their members. How many of them, when we do call our members, do we refer to the clock? How many of us say, I'll be there in 10 minutes, right? There's a lot of people say, I'll be there in 10 minutes. But think about this. If people don't have a perception of time, like he said, there's no concept in time, there's no perception in time, and they put us on the clock when they first got the call, if we say, I'll be there in 10 minutes, is it possible And let's just say you just got the call and you called the member right away and you said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Is it possible that the member is thinking that 10 minutes is the end of the 40 minutes, the 45 minutes, or the 30 minutes that they were originally promised? It's very quite possible. I have a bunch of stories that prove it true, right? I was in Hawaii. I had a driver that I was working with in Hawaii, and he thought he was the best driver ever. And he was a great driver. But he didn't understand these 4 steps of CTE when we first started doing them. And I said, let's just try them. And he's like, okay. And he said, let's make a deal. If they don't work, we can throw it away and we can run calls the rest of the day my way. I'm like, no problem. If these don't work, we'll do it your way. And so we get our first call at 7 o'clock in the morning. The tablet rings, it drops on us, boom. He's like looking at the script. He's like, okay, I can do this. He calls the member and he tells them who he is and where he's at. He said, you know, he let them know that we were right there at Kalakaua and Pauakalani, right down the street from the Ala Moana Mall. And he tells them, you know, okay, I'm right here and I'm going to be there in 10 minutes. And the lady's like, okay, great. We circle around, we pull into the Ala Moana Mall, probably 7 minutes. We get right there, and she's happy. She comes out of Starbucks, right? She's got board shorts and flip-flops. She's got a Toyota pickup with a surfboard in the back of the truck. She's got nothing to worry about. She's not in a hurry for nothing. She wants to go surfing. And we open her car, lickety-split, we're done. We shake her hand, and guess what she says? I guarantee you, she says, man, that was the fastest 30 minutes ever. We walk back to the truck. He takes his card, and he throws it off to the side. He says, guess what? It doesn't work. We're doing it my way for the rest of the day. I said, what do you mean it doesn't work? He said she still thought we took 30 minutes. We got there in 7, right? I said, that's because you told her we'd be there in 10. Did you talk to her about the clock? So he's like, no. I'm like, that's the important thing is we have to wake these people up and we got to shake their mind and change the reality of where they were to where they need to be, right? And if you sit there, if somebody puts you on the clock when they first broke down, when they first had a problem, and you talk to them and you tell them, you know what, I just got your call. And my name is Richard, and I work for AAA. Don't tell me your name's Richard if it's not, right? Tell them your name. But then you say, I'm Richard. I'm right over here at the corner of Ala Moana, or the Kalakaua and Pauakalani, and you're at the Ala Moana Mall, and I can be there in 10 minutes. Guess what? I just got your call. It's 11:42. I'll see you at 11:52. Will that be all right? They're like, wow, right? And they're like, they identified for the first time since they had a problem. They heard the background noise of the guy that was coming to help them. Right? They also identified because they knew where I was in relationship to where they were. And for the first time since they had a problem, I put their mind to ease and they waited for me to come and they were happy. Right? How many times have you not called a member and then you showed up on the call and they were angry? Right? Because it took a long time to get there and there was no ice breaking. Right? How many of us apologize and say we're sorry? Right? I used to say I'm sorry all the time to members, and you know what? I didn't realize that sorry sucks. We were running calls and we were on the Big Island and there was a volcano going and people were scrambling around because they wanted to get their cars out of the way because they were worried that it was going to catch on fire or this and that. And we were running calls and on average, every single call that we were running on average was taking over an hour to get to, and these members were angry. They were upset, and we weren't doing some of these 4 steps to CTE. And we would show up, and I had some big old boys getting mad, and they'd be like, "Man, where you been?" We're like, "Running calls, bro. I'm so sorry." And he was like, "You better be sorry. Is AAA going to give me a free membership?" And I looked at him. I'm like, "No, this, you know, I'm sorry. Let us get us going." And sorry kept him angry. And so I went to this driver, and I was talking to him like, "We can't say sorry no more." He's like, "What are we going to do?" I'm like, "We're going to change the words. We're going to tell him thank you." Next call we get to, we go to run this call, and this big old guy comes out. I'm like, I'm definitely not telling him sorry, right? This big old guy comes out, and I walk up to this guy, and I told him, "Man, thank you for your patience," before I could say anything. And this guy's angry face went from to, okay, right? Gave me his card. We did some of the things. We did a service. But it was just a change in the words from I'm sorry to thank you. Thank you for your patience. I know you're in a hurry. Let me get you on your way. And they're like, it changed everything. Ever since I started using thank you, not one more person yelled at me the rest of the day or the rest of the weeks that I was there when we were running behind on service. Nobody yelled at me no more, just because I changed some of the words that I was used to using to some new words and some new attitude about running service and making sure that we did a great job. You know, it's that simple to make sure that we change the words from, "Hey, I'll be there in 10 minutes, to talking about the clock. That I just got your call and it's 10 o'clock and I can be there by 10:10. You know what? I'm right down the street. I'm right over here at the corner, walk and don't walk, in the city of Lost and Found, in the state of confusion, right next to you, in a world of hurt, and I'll be there in 10 minutes. I'll see you at 10:10. And they're like, wow, I know where that's at, and yeah, that's great. We were able to conquer the one thing that we had a bad time with, and that's the response time. Takes us right over to step number 2. We're going halfway through this already, right? Step number 2 is important, and I watch a lot of times that we botch it. It's the arrival. Showing up with a great smile, right? Showing up with a great smile and asking to see their membership card. I have some guys tell me around the different parts of the states that the club sent me, where they say, well, the member might get mad at me if I ask them for their cards, right? And I'm like, no, members love when you ask them for their cards. How many people in this room right now today, right, have people when they go and they go to service a member where the member says, this is the first time I used my membership card in 25 years. Look at that. Right? This is the first time that I used my membership in 25 years. That's $2,500 that they paid to see you today. And I never thought about that more than I did. When we were running calls in the Big Island, I was with the driver, and we were running calls, and we were working on these things, and we had those storms going on. I took the driver over to a little grocery store, and we bought a bottle of water. We went over to the refrigerator, and there was a little Japanese lady that went over there to get a gallon of milk. She goes to get a gallon of milk. It's like $8 for a gallon of milk. And I was like, man, I was thinking that's a lot of money for a gallon of milk, right? And she goes over to the counter, and she's going through her coin purse, and she's digging through money to come up with that $8 to buy that gallon of milk. But in her little billfold wallet was a AAA card. And I got to meet that little lady outside when I went there, and I asked her a question because I saw her AAA card and it had a big 50. And it said 50 years. She had been a member for 50 years on that island. And the whole time she'd been paying for service. And I asked her if she'd ever had a chance to use it, and she told me once in 50 years. That lady paid over $5,000. She was struggling to find $8 to pay for a gallon of milk. But she knew how important it was for her to have that AAA card in case she needed it in case of an emergency. And that's how much it meant to her. And I'm thinking, wow. Right? And that changed my mindset from then on whenever I was talking to members about their membership and how important it was for me to say thank you for your membership. You know, and I talk to you guys, and I tell you right now, if you do that every single time, like the 3 C's of consistent procedures, to be able to say, hi, I'm Richard, I called you earlier, I let you know I'd be here at 10:10, I got here at 10:08, I knew you were in a hurry, I just wanted to get here for you. Do you mind if I see your AAA card and your ID? And they're like, okay, here, great. And then I tell her, I said, ma'am, Mrs. Smith, do you know what this says? They haven't seen the show, they don't know what it is, right? I know what I'm going to do, I know what I'm going to say. And I said, it says you've been a member for 25 years. I want to tell you thank you very much. You won them over. You could almost just trip your way through the rest of the call, and they're going to love you because you thanked them for their membership, because you made it sound sincere and said, man, I seen you've been a member for 25 years, and I just want to tell you thank you very much for that. It means the world to me, right? Now you got a friend for life. And you go and you're able to do the service, but asking permission to do the service is huge, right? I see a lot of guys tremble on this one, is asking permission to do the service. You're being graded on it. We'll see a little part of the survey when we get towards the end of this, right? But you're being graded on your courtesy. Right? A lot of drivers that I watch, and I've done mystery shopping and I got stories galore on, a lot of drivers think that when they're called out to go service a member, that they've already greeted the member and they just walk up to the car and they just get in and start doing what they're doing. But some of these members might not want you in their car. They might want you to ask permission. They might want to ask you before you get in their trunk. I've had all kinds of drivers do all kinds of crazy stuff and just start doing the service. And you know what? I've seen some bad reactions to it. I've also done some mystery shopping, which is kind of fun when you get to go out and do some mystery shopping. I was doing a mystery shop, and a driver had came up. He was in an F650, and he came through the parking lot, and it just kind of, it was a summery day, but it was kind of rainy, but I was still out in shorts and flip-flops, and I was standing right there, and this driver comes rolling into the parking lot, and he comes up, and he stops his F650 tow truck right next to me, and I got my little Honda parked right there in a parking space, and he comes out, he jumps out of the tow truck, and he's got a set of jumper cables, and he's got his clipboard, he's got a $20 bill hanging from the clipboard, and he comes over there, and he drops the live cables because he plugged them in his bumper. He drops the live cables right next to my feet where I'm standing in water. I'm like, hello. And I jump out of the water. And the guy starts filling out the paperwork, and he puts it down. And then he put his arm on me, and he said, excuse me. And he just moves me. He moves me out of the way, and he walks up to my door, and he goes to open my door, and he didn't even ask me permission to get in. And I'm like, hold on, stop, wait a minute. And the guy's like, what? Right? And I show him my little AAA badge, and I tell him this is a mystery shop. And he says, oh. I said, what are you hanging your head for? He says, I did bad. I go, you think? Right? I said, come on over here and talk to me. So we started talking, and I said, I got to ask you a question. He's like, what's up? I said, I've been doing this a long time, and I have never seen the $20 hanging from the clipboard. And he's like kind of got a smile on his face, and I'm like, what's the $20 bill for? He goes, I wanted you to know I accept tips. And I'm like, you wanted me to know you accept tips with service like that? I'm like, you gotta give it your all, right? You gotta give some pizzazz when you're providing service to people, and you gotta ask permission to get in their vehicle before you start doing it. right? You got to make sure that you say, man, earlier when I called you, you let me know you had a flat tire. You mind if I get in your trunk and get started on the job? And they're going to be like, oh yeah, sure, great. Because you're being graded on it and because it's the right thing to do. You know, showing up to do the service and asking permission to do it is really important. It takes us to step 3. I'm telling you right now, step 3 is doing the service and finding a way to go the extra mile. I put them on the back. It'll be on the next slide, but I put these on the back as ideas for you guys to be able to say the plus ones, right? Going the extra step, extra mile. As far as also on the survey, you're being graded on it. The members are asked, did the driver go out of his way to help you? You got to find a way to take credit for it. How many times when you guys are running calls and you're talking and you're communicating to the member that they got you kind of tuned out, or they're not really paying attention, or when you even go to close the call and they're like, okay, yeah, and then they walk away, but you didn't feel like there was any real good communication there. You know, I found ways and words that you can use that traps people into the conversation. I'll be changing a tire and I'll be down on one knee and I'll be popping the lug nuts off, and I'll ask Mrs. Smith, can you do me a favor? And right away, because I asked, can you do me a favor? She's like, yeah, how can I help you? She might be thinking, does he want me to help him change? Does he want me to help hold a flashlight? She might be thinking all kinds of things, but I shook her up by saying, can you do me a favor? And she's like, yeah, what's up? How can I help you? And I'm like, you know what? I noticed that you're missing a valve stem cap on this other tire, and that this one was already flat. Do you mind if I go check the air pressure in all the other 4 tires while I'm here? I don't want you to go down the road and have another flat tire. She's like, oh my God, would you? It's a big difference than saying, hey, can you do me a favor, and asking to do it, than just doing it because your boss says, hey, you know what? I got a complaint from my AAA supervisor, and from now on, we're checking air in all the tires. And then you're going to do what your boss says, and you go out and you change a tire, and you check the air pressure in all of them. You're like, okay, thank you. Bye, have a nice day. Is she thinking that you went the extra mile? Is she thinking you did the extra step? Or is she thinking that you did what you were supposed to do? Right? Well, I guarantee you, when you ask somebody, hey, can you do me a favor? Will you allow me to do something for you? It shakes them up, and they're like, wow, now it's locked in. Now they remember it. You know, asking somebody permission to do these things is huge. I guarantee you, there was drivers that tell me, no, this doesn't work, or you know what, it's kind of foo-foo. Well, guess what? This was fun for me because I taught a class just like this in November, and one of the drivers said, how do you know all this stuff works? Well, the next slide tells me there's a member that wrote me a letter, and she wrote this letter, said she'd been a member for 28 years. I know this is the most memorable service experience I ever had in those years, and maybe in the years to come. Right? At the end of the service run, David noted that one of the air caps was missing from my tires, grabbed one off of his truck to replace it. He also noticed that my gas light was on and poured me a gallon of gas so I wouldn't need to call them again. That driver was sitting in my CTE class, and he came up to me and he was so proud about that, and he said, that was about me, and it was because I listened to what you said in the CT class, and this stuff really works. You know, members don't know, they haven't seen the show. When I was a tow truck driver, I used to keep a big old box of air caps. I used to keep a box of air caps in my truck, and I used to make sure that they were in my toolbox. The members didn't know it. I would go put one on my front tire. I put one on my front tire, and I would get to a call. Almost every single time we go run a call, they're missing a valve stem cap, and we look at the member and we say, hey, you know what, hold on really quick. You're missing a valve stem cap. You mind if I get one for you? And they're like looking at you, they're watching you, and you walk over to your front tire of your tow truck, you get it off, and you put it on them. The lady's like, don't you need it? I'm like, you need it more, don't worry about it, right? And she's like, whoa, the guy just gave me something of his. You know, they leave, they're down the road, I go over to my tunnel box, I grab it, and I go get it, and I put one on my front tire again, and she never knew the difference. But she thought that was the best service ever. Well, this driver did that. And this member said that's the most valuable service that she's had in 28 years, right? So these things really do work. They really do. All you got to do is implement them. I guarantee you that when you do these things, the members are going to be paying attention as long as you take credit for them. As long as you say, can you do me a favor? Do you mind if I do this for you? Right? There's all kinds of things that when we capture members, how many times as a tow truck driver do you tow a car to a place where a member's not going with you? Right? How hard is it to close a call with a member when you haven't even delivered their car? Right? You got their maybe $50,000 to $80,000, $100,000 car, $40,000 car, $30,000 car on the back of your tow truck, and you're going to take it to some place they've never met you before in their life. Right? And you're sitting there saying, okay, right? I hope you're totally satisfied with your service today. And they're like, well, my car hasn't even made it there yet, you know? And they don't have any comfort yet, right? But if you're sitting there and you secure the car to the truck and you've done all of your job up to the way we're talking about right now, and you've done these things, and you said, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Smith, can you do me a favor? And they're like, oh, what's up? would you mind if I text you to let you know your car made it there safe and who I gave your keys to? And they're like, oh man, would you? That means a lot, right? And so then they're sitting there and they got in their expectation. Now they're waiting to hear from you again. How easy is it to close now? Right? How easy is it to close, to sit there to make sure that you get the right close? A little while ago I asked you guys, is when members are communicating with you and you're trying to close a call, that they got you halfway turned out and their minds are already stuck on their problems, and they're like, okay, all right, and they're already walking to go talk to their mechanic or their husband or their family member, and they stop paying attention to you, and you don't have the ability to sit there and say, right, hey, I want to make sure you were totally satisfied. I found ways to be able to grab them and get a hold of them and sit there and say, can I ask you a question? I guarantee you, think about it. Think about this. If you're providing service to somebody and you went over the top, right, and you smiled and you thanked them for their membership card, right, and you told them, may I get in your vehicle, and then you did the +1 and said, hey, can you do me a favor? Will you allow me to do this for you, right? That it's so much easier at the end of the call to say, can I ask you a question? I guarantee you, it is so easy to say, can I ask you a question? Nobody's going to say no. Nobody's going to say no. Can I ask you a question? Yeah, sure, what's up? Right? If anybody was to ask you about my service today, would you be able to say you were totally satisfied? Do you know not one member has ever told me no? Ever since I started that technique, can I ask you a question? And they're like, yeah, right? And I say, if anybody was to ask you about the service I was to provide, would you be able to say you were totally satisfied? Every single one of them said, over the top. Best service ever. Definitely totally satisfied. I got them saying the words out of their own mouth that I needed from them, and the end results of what we get graded on is total satisfaction. And that's why I built this workshop, is to give you guys a few creative words to change on the way and the concepts and the things that you do, and how you can do a better job at it and get the best results possible. Because at the end of the day, it all matters. You guys matter. I want to be able to talk to you guys about right here what matters most. There's a lot of things that we talked about, and this is a little bit contradictory, which we also said the worst thing that we get graded on is the response time, right? The response time is the worst thing we get graded on, except for members were asked on a survey, why did you mark a survey totally satisfied, right? What were the key indicators that made them happy? 26% of the people said the phone operator. Right? The person they talked to was the reason why they made it totally satisfied. 21% of the people said, the only reason why I got it totally satisfied was because I got a fast response time. 54% of the people said the only reason why I marked the survey totally satisfied was because I had an awesome driver. That driver controls the scene. Right? The driver takes care of everything that matters. I said, what matters most? What matters most is you. We talked about it in Highway Heroes, going home safe, being safe, doing the job right, doing it consistent. What matters most is you guys. What matters most is that you guys get the credit for what you guys do. Let me tell you something. Running calls in Kentucky in this snow, right, in this cold air, you guys are already heroes. You guys are my heroes, I'm telling you right now. It ain't no fun being out there in that cold. But these people are waiting on you guys to do a great job, and you guys are being graded on it. Let me tell you something. There's 10 questions. 10 questions that are asked that change back from when I first started doing service in the 80s to where we are now in 2018, right? There's 10 questions that say from how we used to be, hook and book, right? And from moving cars instead of moving members to now moving members instead of moving cars. Because the way they designed these questions, they were asked, right, the service driver, they want to know how the truck was. It's the very first question on the survey about the driver was how the truck was. Why is that the first question? Because it says that's the first thing that they see. Right? And then the next thing is about the appearance of the driver, and it says, why is that the second question? Because that's the second thing the member sees when you get out of your truck. And then it's got the third question, right? Acknowledgement and greeting, identification, courtesy, calming, reassuring, effectively communicated, like the 3 C's. Right? Knew how to service your vehicle correctly. Knew how to service your vehicle correctly. What is that? That's being a great service truck driver. That's being a great tow truck driver. That's not damaging a car. That's about, back in the old days, getting the car from here to there. Right? Went out of the way to serve the vehicle promptly and going out of the way to help you with the +1s. Right? That shows you right there, 9 questions out of 10 said, how did you do it? Right? 1 question out of the 10 said, did you do it without damaging the car? Right? Did you know how to be a great service truck driver? Did you know how to be a great tow truck driver? 1 question, 10%, 90% says, did you move the member? Right? So where's the focus? The focus is on the customer service, and what matters most is you. And thank you. What you guys do matter. And that's all I got for you guys today. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate the time you guys spent to be here. Thank you very much.